the next subject that will be discussed by Mr. Aaminou from Wail. So he will make a presentation about market potential and consumers' expectations, case presented by banking in Morocco. Just before I give you, I leave the floor to you, sorry, I just would like to remind all the audience that there are some free books that the association brought today, so you can have them. Here are the free books, and there are some books that you can buy if you're interested in, so do not hesitate to come and take a look during the break. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم again. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy to be at Akhawayn today. It's a very nice campus. We had a very nice lunch, so I'm so sleepy for the presentation. Please bear with me. It's going to be short and concise, and I hope that we have interactions, quick Q&A. That's very good presentation. The topic that was chosen for me, I didn't choose this topic, but was market potential and consumer expectations, case of Morocco. The presentation plan will go as follows. We'll talk about market potential. How can we measure the market potential? Because this is a question that every time people are asking about what is the market potential, especially banks that would like to enter into the industry. And we're working with a number of Moroccan banks and international banks in this topic specifically. So they ask me the question, what's the market potential? Is it worth going to those markets? What's the size of the market? So I will try to give some idea and hints about how to measure the market potential in Morocco. I think also about the consumer profile, because at the end of the day, it's nice to have Islamic banks, but you need people to buy those products. So what's the consumer profile? And what is the consumer behavior? How do consumers behave with regards to Islamic banking products or ethical products? So, and then we'll finish the conclusion. So hopefully it's going to take 20 minutes or 25. To measure market potential, of course, if we like to measure something, we need metrics. And there are a couple of metrics that I usually use. So you've got banking penetration rate, which is the number of banking accounts divided by the population that can have a bank account. So it can go beyond 100% in some countries. We've got also total assets, which is a second metric. We have return on equity, return on assets. We can have a lot of metrics. But let's say that those two first metrics are used, banking penetration and total assets for Islamic banking. So those are like the main metrics, especially total assets, because they care about what's the market share of Islamic banking compared to conventional banking. But banking penetration also can be used as well. When it comes to measuring the market's potential and trying to answer the question, what's the potential for the Moroccan market? I think, first of all, why Morocco is interested, why many players today are interested by Morocco or interested in Morocco. We have many reasons. First of all, we have a maturity of the banking market. When we talk about maturity, we are compared to other countries, of course. We are not France, we are not the US, but compared to the region, it's a mature market. And Morocco, as you know, is the main player in French-speaking Africa. So if you go to Senegal, if you go to Mali or such countries, you'll find that the Moroccan banks are number one. So we are a regional player. And many players that come to Morocco, they are also thinking of Africa. For instance, if you take a player like Al-Baraka, for instance, they have, as you know, a joint partnership with BNCE, or BNCE in French. So they're looking for the Moroccan market, but they're also thinking to go to Africa, because as you know, BNCE through Bank of Africa is a major player in Africa. So the fact of being a regional player is important for our country. And of course, we have consumers' demand. So there are many surveys, I will go back to surveys, that demonstrate that there is a demand. People are asking for Islamic banking product. They like to do banking in a Sharia compliant manner. So those are mostly, for me at least, the main reason why many banks are interested in the Moroccan banking market for Islamic finance. So now let's go to the tricky question. How can we measure the Moroccan potential for Islamic banking? And for that we have, let's say, three main approaches. The first one, I call it parametric approach, which is we try to make some assumptions with regards to the market, with regards to consumers, with regards to many factors, and we will, through those assumptions or parameters, try to find this magic number, which is the market's potential. So that's the first approach. The second approach would be, we call it peers approach. What do we mean by that? I mean, we look at other countries because, as Dr. Lahmoud said, we are maybe the latest country to adopt Islamic banking. And that would be a good thing as well because we have all past experiences, so we can benchmark ourselves with those experiences. So for instance, if we look at Tunisia, and if we saw the trend, what is the trend of Islamic banking compared to conventional banking? All else equal, they're never equal of course, but let's say if everything is equal, we can extrapolate the results into Morocco. So that's the second approach. And the third approach would be like kind of a hybrid approach, kind of mixed. A parametric approach with a peers approach. Okay, so let's look at the parametric approach. So for this approach, we have many parameters, but here I just summarize the main parameters. The first one would be consumers' expectations. What do we mean by consumers' expectations? I mean, what is the opinion of consumers with regards to Islamic banking? And this is, for me, the trickiest part because it's so difficult to measure this part for many reasons. Because the way we do that is the following: I mean, we're using surveys and we're asking customers about what attitude with regards to Islamic banking. So this is the way it works. But in reality, as you know, surveys, they have a lot of biases. Many biases to the point that the error margin is extremely high. So that's because the idea of the survey is to sample, to ask the sample, and to use the result of the entire population. But as surveys have many biases, this is a very difficult task. And let me give you some examples. For instance, one of the biases, if, for instance, just having face-to-face interviews is a form of bias. For instance, if I'm the interviewer and interviewing someone in the street, I say, suppose that I give you the same product, Islamic banking and conventional banking products. Of course, different products, but serving the same purpose, for instance, car financing. What would you choose? I say, I'm going to choose Islamic banking. Second question, if I increase the price by 5%, what would you choose? Okay, Islamic banking, say in this case. But is it really what the person will do if the person is faced with those two options? So here we have face-to-face bias that can influence the result, because we're talking about compliance, and some people might feel that maybe they won't give you the real answer. So there are some biases in the survey. Other biases, for instance, is the knowledge of Islamic finance. If you don't know about Islamic finance, how would you predict your behavior? We're talking about something that you really don't know. For instance, if I think that Islamic finance is 0% loan, so that's my opinion. And you ask me about Islamic banking, I said, yes, this is a good product, but in reality, Islamic banking is not 0% loan. This is a misconception. So the fact of having a wrong idea about Islamic finance or Islamic banking in general can lead to wrong results. And there are many biases that makes the surveys at least not significant in my point of view. And of course, there is the big problem, is we call the intention gap problem. Okay? Because when you have a survey, just an intention. If you have this, what would you do? So at the end of the day, it's just an intention. But you know there is a gap between intention and action. Because if you go back to the ethical problems or ethical products, you know the approach that we call socially responsible product or fair trade products. If you look at the surveys, you find like more than 40% of the respondents, they are keen to buy socially responsible products, but in reality, those products in the market just represent 2%. So there is always a gap between intention and action. So when you hear, for instance, that 97% of Moroccans are willing to consider to buy Islamic banking products, I think we have to be extremely careful with those numbers. So we have to apply a big discount factor to those numbers. But anyway, you can use surveys, but you have to be extremely careful because talk is cheap. The second factor that will influence the market potential is the bank choices. If you look at the Morocco Islamic Finance report, and if you look at the interviews, you'll see that For banks, at least from a strategy standpoint, they expect to open like 10 branches a year. This is the case for instance for Malaysia, at least this is what Mr. Rorty said in the interview. So we're talking about 10 branches a year. So the bank choices, how many branches are being opened, will influence the market size. So this is the importance, because this is we think this is a supply driven market. So if you have like 10 branches, of course you can't capture a big chunk of the market. The third factor, and today we're fortunate to have with us Mr. Mohammed, because he explained on taxation. Taxation is important. If taxation is doing wrongly, it will impact the market share, definitely. I mean, if you are doing a bad taxation with regards to, for instance, whatever have, more or less the problem is fixed. But if we think about Musharaka Mutanaqis as a product, if taxation does not follow, maybe the product won't be interesting. Even though from a conceptual standpoint the product is interesting, but from a practical standpoint the product will be very cheap, very expensive, sorry. So taxation will play a role. We have the regulatory aspects as well. When we talk about capital adequacy, when we talk about the ratios, the liquidity ratios that the bank should follow, today we don't know about those parameters because the central bank has not issued the guidelines about those parameters. So in the absence of such factors, it's very hard to predict what will be the market size as well. So there are kind of many parameters that we can't predict today. And finally, you have the macroeconomy, because banking, as we know, is related to macro, so it's related to GDP and so on. So you have also to have some assumptions with regards to GDP and other factors. So you see that coming up with the number is not an easy task because we are making a lot of assumptions. And since there are a lot of assumptions, the margin of error is extremely high. The second approach would be to use peers approach. This is the example I explained, like in Tunisia. You can take the example of Turkey as well. So you take a benchmark. You need to adapt the benchmark to Morocco because the countries are not equal, the population is not the same, the maturity is not the same, and so on. So the numbers need to have some adaptation, and then you come up with a conclusion. So this is a second approach, which can be safer, but also it has a lot of risk because the countries are not the same. So this is just an example of some peers approach. I took that from the EY report, the latest one. So here you've got the banking penetration, and also you have the market share of Islamic banking or participation banking. So you see, for instance, in some countries, if you look at Egypt, it's less than, I think it's around 5%. Turkey is 6-7%. So even though in some countries, so you can say, for instance, if you look at Turkey, for Morocco, like Turkey, so for instance, in 5 years we will reach 5% market share. So it could be a way of estimating the market's potential. This is another example. So this is Zaytuna Bank, the evolution of deposits, like current accounts and saving and investment accounts. So you see that the current account deposit actually are around like 35%, and the saving and investment account are around 65%. So if we are like Tunisia, we will use the same ratios to estimate the market potential. So that's an approach that would be doable. Again, countries are different, regulations are different, so we have to take into account the difference between those factors. So for this part, I think I'm not going to give you a number because it depends on many assumptions. And in fact, some in the reports you find a number, but for me, it means nothing because it depends on the assumption, because there are a huge error margin, and there is also a large sensitivity to assumptions. If you change assumptions a little bit, the final result will be completely different. So we have to be careful with that. And I think that the hybrid approach is better. I mean, we can mix an approach comparison with other countries plus a parametric approach. And I think also that in this risk, with regards to market potential, we have to be very conservative because that's better than being optimistic. So this is just some ideas about how we can compute markets and market potential. So just to give you a benchmark, 5% market potential, this is high for similar countries. If Morocco has 5% market share, that's a good performance compared to other countries. For the consumer profile, I mean, this is just to show you an example. This is a cognitive approach. So you have a consumer, he has a need, the consumer searches for alternative, customer does an assessment, there's a purchase and post-purchase, and there are external factors that impact the behavior of the consumer. So here, this is a positive model. But this is, for me, a good model. But I will talk about how we can move beyond such models. Let's give you some statistics about consumer profile in the countries. If you look at Bank Muamalat in Malaysia, there are 20% of deposits and 40% of financing are from non-Muslim clients. And this is very important. And we talked about that in the morning. I mean, that Islamic finance is not necessarily for Muslim people. It could be also interesting for non-Muslim. And this is the beauty of Islamic finance. It's not a finance for Muslims. This is a different value proposition. And if we work on the value proposition, we can have higher numbers than those. If you look at KFH, which is Wail Aaminou in Malaysia, 40% of deposits and 40% of financing are from non-Muslim customers. So this is interesting. So don't think that the buyers or the consumers of Islamic banks are Muslim. Could be non-Muslim as well. So this is almost half of the customers are not Muslim. So this is very interesting. So what are they looking for? Or how can we classify them? You know, in marketing, the first thing you have to do segmentation, and then you have to do targeting, and then you have to do positioning. So how can we differentiate between those customers? So this is a research done by Mark Plus Insights in Indonesia that classify the different consumer segments. And here we found the 5 segments. We have people that are mainly for Islamic finance. You have also people that are followers. What do I mean by followers? I mean, if my brother opens an account in Islamic bank, I will do the same. So I'm a follower in this case. Or my professor, or someone who influences me, I will do the same thing. We have people that are neutral. They are, to paraphrase, I don't know who said that, so actually, je suis pas pour la finance islamique, je suis pas contre non. So it's like neutral. We have also people that are obliged. Sometimes in some companies, especially in the GCC region, they will oblige you to have an Islamic banking account. So if you don't have that, you can't do business with them. So sometimes you are just obliged to do Islamic banking. And also finally, we have people that are against Islamic banking. Okay? So those are the segments according to this study. In Malaysia, we have a different work. So they divided the consumer in five groups, or 4 groups, sorry. So we have people that are religiously convinced. So those people, they want Sharia compliance, even though the price may be more expensive. We have people that are ethically observant group. So those people are non-Muslim, but they see that in the Islamic banking, there is an ethical value proposition. So they are keen to open Islamic banking accounts, for instance. We have people that are, we call them economic rationality group. What do you mean by that? That I see just the economic benefits of the transaction, so I don't care about ethics, I don't care about religion. So for me, the only driver will be economic driven. And we have also mixed, people that are mixing religious conviction with economic motives. For instance, I would like to have an Islamic banking account, but if it's not very expensive, or I would like to have an Islamic banking financing, provided it's not very expensive. So this is this kind of people that make sure compliant with economic criteria. So if, to sum up this part, I mean, if we'd like to segment the consumer segment, I think that we have 4 dimensions, or 3 dimensions in this case. We have religiosity as a dimension. This is important. Religiosity is the level of your attachment to the religion. So definitely this is a dimension. The second dimension would be economic driven. I would say that I will look into economic parameters. I mean, whether the product is good, whether you have a better quality of service, your branch is close, and so on. And finally, we have the ethics driven, because we have many people today that don't have any attachment to religion, but they care about ethics. So we can attract those groups of people to Islamic banking as well. So that's also important. So with those 3 dimensions, we can have good kind of segmentation and to understand the consumer profile. Right? So to wrap up this part, keep in mind that consumers are not the same. Even though that they're buying Islamic banking product, doesn't mean that they belong to the same segment. So they could be different. So they have different motives. Let's close with consumer behavior. Consumer behavior, what are the criteria that a consumer will follow in order to buy or not buy the product? There are 4 criteria, and this is the result of a market survey, by the way. The first one is Sharia compliance. That's important. Whether your product is Sharia compliant or not will drive the decision, definitely. If you're not Sharia compliant, you have a probability of losing some people, that's for sure. And Sharia compliant, I'm not talking about Sharia compliant, whether you're Sharia compliant or not. We're talking about whether people perceive you as Sharia compliant or not. There is a difference. If I perceive you as not Sharia compliant, even though you are Sharia compliant, you have a problem. So there is a perception of Sharia compliance and there is Sharia compliance as well. So Sharia compliance is definitely a factor. The second factor that sometimes people don't like to talk about, but this is a factor we can't deny it, which is cost. How much does it cost for a financing? So people, this is a criteria for some people. Okay, a criterion for some people. Cost and profitability when we talk about investment accounts. So this is also a parameter that will impact the decision finally. The third factor, which is also an important factor, is quality of service. Do you have the same quality of service as conventional banking, or do you have a good customer relationships? This is also definitely a factor. And the last factor is proximity. The location of your branches. Are they close? Are they far, and so on? How long should I take to go to the closest branch? So this is also a factor. So this is all. Those are a set of factors that will influence the decision. What's the level of influence? It depends on each customer, on the segments of each customer. For instance, customers that are Sharia compliant. So this is the most important factor. For other people, it's a mix of many factors. And to go back to the comment this morning, we don't want that Islamic banking focus only on Sharia compliance. Yes, it has to be Sharia compliant. This is by construction. It has to observe Sharia. But we would like that Islamic banking has a better quality of service, has better proximity, and also, if possible, better costs or better profitability for the customers. That's what we should seek as professionals in Islamic banking. We have to put this comment, this is important, is that the criteria can change according to the customers, of course, and according to the products. For instance, when it comes to opening an account, I don't have the same criteria. The criteria don't have the same weights as in the case of financing. So the criteria change depending on the product and depending on the amount of financing. In the research of what we did, we found out that when it comes to, if the amount of financing is low, for instance 60,000 dirhams, price doesn't matter much because you don't see it on the different installments you pay. But when it comes to housing, we take 1 million dirham financing, the change of, if you take for instance plus 0.25 in the margin, the impact is important in Islam. So the price, will, the amount of financing will change the criteria in a significant manner. And second, the comment is that we have always a gap between intention and action. Even though people will tell you, yes, I'm going to buy it, it's not sure that they will end up buying the products. So I think I'm in the conclusions. 3 things. The first one is to going beyond rationality, and this is important, and this is for people interested in research. That's an important research topic, because when we do surveys, when we work on models and so on, we assume rationality. What we mean by rationality, if I have 2 options, option 1 and option 2, if the utility of option 1 is greater than the utility of option 2, I will opt for option 1. So that's a rational model. But in reality, people are not rational. Sometimes, and in fact, every day we make irrational decisions. So how can we use those irrational models, so to speak, and apply them in the context of Islamic banking to predict the behavior? That will be interesting, because most of the works done in like behavioral econ, they are done in Western-like settings. So it will be interesting to do research in this kind of hybrid models in Islamic banking and finance. The second aspect is that, you know, when banks will start in Morocco at least, they can't have like better products because they will start with basic products, and usually it's going to be Murabaha at the beginning. That's the reality. We can't have Musharaka or Sanaki, so we can't have like very sophisticated product because we need to educate the markets progressively. And the pricing, they can't have a very competitive pricing because there are economies of scale, as we need to respect. So marketing will be a differentiating factor. So if Islamic banks are good at marketing, so that's very important in terms of competition and in terms of having a successful beginning. And finally, and this is to Mr. Khalid, the new response, is that Islamic banking often, just always the benchmark is conventional. We say, Murabaha, this is like loan financing. Ijara, this is like leasing. So we have always this feeling that we are always comparing with conventional, because the products somewhat are similar in terms of results, but sometimes the structure is different, but there is this problem of mimicking conventional. If Islamic banking, as in the presentation of Sahih Sinawi, or Islamic finance in general, we can create like genuine product, new products we can have what we call blue oceans. It means that we can attract new market segments, and it's going to be very profitable for the bank, and we won't have any issues with comparison with conventional. I think with that, I finished the presentation. Thank you for your attention.